The United Kingdom is home to many different languages, and recently I've been thinking about language flags, that is, portraying different languages with different flags and some of the issues attached to it. And so I thought, what if we had language flags for each of the languages in the United Kingdom? Let's start with English. Of course, English is the main language of the United Kingdom, spoken by 91.1% of the population, which is around 52.5 million people. As I mentioned in this video, English is of course also a global language, and that might be reflected on the language flag that we use. At the same time though, because this is about the languages of the United Kingdom, maybe something a bit more regional, so the English flag would be appropriate. However, in this video, I think if I just use the regional flags, let's say of England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, it would be quite a boring video. So I'm going to try to avoid these flags and come up with something new for each of the languages. A good starting point for English might actually be the Union Jack, because although it largely developed in England and spoken by English people, it is now the main language spoken by people in each of its constituent nations. Therefore, I quite like this design, which I found on Reddit. It was posted and mentioned that it is of course the Union Jack with some modifications based on the influences on English. So we can see that in each corner we have a different influence, one being the colours of the Norwegian flag because of the Old Norse influence. Another corner has the colours of the German flag given its Germanic heritage. Another one has the gold and red of Rome because of the Latin influence at various points in England, and another has the red, white and blue of French, given that Norman had a very large influence on English. So the next language is Scots. Now, for a long time, Scots wasn't considered to be a separate language, but rather a variety of English. It's a little bit hard to tell when someone is a Scots speaker rather than a speaker of Scottish English, but these statistics are based on the previous census of people who self-reported being a Scots speaker, so we're going to take them at their word. That's around 2.23% of the UK's population, which is around 1.5 million people. Most of the time they are represented simply with St Andrew's flag, that is, the saltire, the flag of Scotland. However, that's a little bit tricky in this case because Scotland doesn't just have Scots as a separate minority language. Therefore, it might be good to look at using a different flag. These are two examples that I found online that I really liked, and we'll go into why. They show the Scots language with not just the Scottish saltire, which features prominently, but also the red cross found on the flag of Ulster, which is a region in the north of Ireland where there are also Scots speakers as a result of 17th century migrations and plantations from Scotland that brought the language with them. As well, we have in the central shield the old flag of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Northumbria. This is important for two reasons. The first being that it stretched up into what is today Scotland in the area of Lothian around Edinburgh, but especially for the Scots language because it is from this Northumbrian form of Old English that Scots developed on a separate path to the modern English language, which is why Scots is considered a separate language to English. Of the two designs though, I feel like the first is probably the best, just because it's a little bit less cluttered and because the majority of former Northumbria doesn't actually speak Scots. They speak standard English and have various dialects as well of English rather than being part of the Scots language area. Welsh is spoken by around 0.9% of the UK's population, which is just over 500,000 people. The Welsh flag is one of the most iconic flags out there. It's frequently voted the best flag in the world, and you can see why. So I don't really want to make many changes to this flag, apart from to add one little blue stripe in the back. This blue stripe represents a colony of Welsh speakers in Argentina, where Welsh continues to be spoken to this day. It also might represent those Welshmen who left their ancestral homeland and became migrants in new countries and took the language with them. So it's a small line of sea as well as a small line of Patagonia in the flag. So that's why I've decided to add that in, and apart from that, we'll be keeping the dragon exactly where he is. Scottish Gaelic is spoken by 0.2% of the UK's population. That's around 135,000 people. Again, Scottish Gaelic is mostly shown with the Scottish flag. However, as with Scots, this is a problem when you need to differentiate between the two. Most of the time, if you look online for a Scottish Gaelic flag, you'll find something that's a little bit generically Celtic. So like this example on the left, which is a lovely flag, but it could be used really for any of the Celtic nations with a triskelion and some knotwork. The other example given is a proposed flag for the Highlands, the region where most Gaelic speakers live, and again with its Nordic cross and its generic colours, it's not really something that specifically speaks to Scottish Gaelic, but rather to a region with connections to the Norse world. So I thought, let's make something a little bit different. This flag here, which I also found, connects Scotland of course with Ireland, with the Irish colours of green, white and orange represented too. This is fitting because Scottish Gaelic originally came from Old Irish and then diverged, so it's closely related to the Irish language. However, again, this seems to be more of a joint flag rather than a specific flag for Scottish Gaelic. That's why I thought it might be better to create something more specific, adding in a tartan pattern to show its connection to the Highlands and the Islands where Scottish Gaelic is spoken. But even this felt a little bit too generic to Scotland, and so I came up with another design that incorporates several elements of the history and the geography of where Gaelic is spoken today. These are the Irish harp that points back to its connections to Ireland and the Irish language, as well as the coat of arms of the Lords of the Isles. This was a Gaelic-speaking political entity that was very powerful in the Hebrides. Finally, it includes the flag of Nova Scotian Gaelic speakers. These are speakers of Scottish Gaelic that moved across the sea to Canada and to this day continue to speak the language, so they should also be represented here on this flag. A final design that I came up with that I thought, well, let's have one design that's completely different to the saltire is a Celtic cross using the same colours as the saltire, but incorporating some elements specific to Scottish Gaelic. These are the waves that are found on the flag of the Outer Hebrides, and it incorporates the ship found on the coat of arms of the Lords of the Isles. Irish is another language that is spoken in the United Kingdom, largely in Northern Ireland by around 71,000 people, or 0.1% of the UK's total population. Most of the time, Irish is represented with the Irish flag. This is the flag of the Republic of Ireland, where the Irish language is official alongside English. However, as previously stated, this of course then relates the Irish language with the government of the Republic of Ireland, so it might be better to come up with something that is a little bit more independent. Some suggestions might be this flag, another former flag used by the Irish in the past, which shows the symbol of the Irish harp on a green background with several clovers, another important symbol for Ireland. But again, this is a rather political symbol and doesn't really speak too much for the language rather than the people. One flag that is interesting that I've seen recently is this flag. It's used by an organisation that's called Overture, and this means the Red Group. They've been important advocates for the rights of Irish speakers in Northern Ireland, and were recently part of a movement that helped to get recognition for the language in Northern Ireland. However, I feel like I certainly hadn't seen this flag before I looked for it, and I'm not sure how well known it is outside Northern Ireland, so to represent the language, I feel like something that speaks more to Irish should be incorporated. I sat down on paint and had a little go myself and came up with this design. I still can't decide whether I like it or not, so let me know in the comments below. It essentially incorporates several colours from the Irish flag, green, white and orange, as well as the yellow that is found, or the gold, on the flag of Ulster that we've already seen. It then finally incorporates the red hand of Ulster, another symbol, which is today often associated with loyalist paramilitaries, but historically also goes back to Irish oral tradition and has been used by both Irish and British aligned communities in the past. Finally, the Irish harp is added together with the red hand in a marriage of these two by way of trying to nullify any possible sectarian interpretation of this symbol. But again, let me know if I've succeeded in any of these goals or if it is ridiculous. I'll see the comments below. This language is often overlooked when it comes to the United Kingdom, and it goes by several names. Most of the speakers will call it patois. However, I'm going to term it Insular Norman. It's spoken by 0.008% of the United Kingdom's population, so around 5,000 people. And to represent it, I'm going to use this flag, which I found online and that I really liked, which represents all the Channel Islands together, incorporating the flags of the two largest, that is Jersey and Guernsey, together to make this one. However, I felt that to represent the language of these islands, which are off the coast of Normandy and is an offshoot of the Norman French language, we should also include something to show the Normans. These lions are found on the Norman flag, that's why they also became part of the English coat of arms, and so I've added them into the top left canton there to represent not only the Normans but also the island of Sark, which has these lions on it, and where this language is also spoken currently by very few people. The Isle of Man technically isn't a part of the United Kingdom but a crown domain. However, I'm still going to include it because we were in the neighbourhood, and why not? Manx is the native language of the island, and it's spoken by around 2.6% of the total population of the island, which is around 2,200 people. This is particularly impressive because Manx actually officially went extinct in the 1970s when the last native speaker died, and has since been the subject of a particularly successful language revival movement, with many people who are now first language speakers as well as even more second language speakers. Most of the time, again, Manx is represented with the flag of the Isle of Man, which shows a triskelion formed of 3 legs with golden spurs. One flag that I found online that may represent the Manx language but really is entailed to represent the Gaelic languages is this one. The Gaelic languages are those languages that have their origin in Ireland, so this of course includes Irish and also Scottish Gaelic and Manx, because the Manx language was brought there by Irish speakers from Ireland and then developed over the centuries into its own language. I had a fiddle around and created this Groningen monstrosity based on some of the other Celtic languages in the neighbourhood of Manx that played a role in its history as well, that being the flag of Ulster, the tricolour of Ireland, the Scottish saltire and the Welsh dragon, but the flag is a little chaotic. I simplified it down using just the colours on the Manx flag onto a design again with a Nordic cross, because the Norse were an important part of the Isle of Man's history and indeed have loanwords in the Manx language, and created this example. But eventually I decided that again, perhaps the best design would be to base it on a Celtic cross, given that this is a Celtic language and that the church played an important role in the revival of the Manx language, as many of the oldest texts written in the language, dictionaries and thesauruses and so on, were written by clergymen. It also speaks to the fact that the Manx language has been reborn, the cross as a symbol of regeneration and rebirth, and coming back from the dead, I thought was quite suitable in the case of the Isle of Man, and I thought it was quite a powerful design to look at in this way. So that's my design for the Manx language. The final language is Cornish. Cornish is spoken by 0.0008% of the population, or around 500 people. And as with Manx, Cornish is also a language that has returned from the dead, but it's even more impressive because Cornish died out several hundred years ago and has also been the product of a successful language revitalization and rebirth movement. Most of the time, Cornish is represented with the flag of Cornwall. It's called St. Piran's flag, and it's a white cross on a black background. Now, to make it a bit more specific to the Celtic language, I thought why not incorporate some Celtic knotwork? Perhaps even incorporate something to show that it's specifically for the Cornish language, with an emblem made of Celtic letters. But then again, I thought maybe a Celtic cross is the best way to go, and I think this is the best design that I came up with in any case. It of course has St. Piran's cross as a Celtic cross, with the letters KRNW for Kernow. Kernow being the Cornish word for Cornwall, and so it incorporates some of the language onto the flag as well. So those were the language flags that I came up with. For English, we have this mixed design that I found online, which incorporates various elements of English language's development and history. For Scots, we have prominently the Scottish saltire, but also the flag of Ulster behind it, which shows its connections to Northern Ireland. For Welsh, we of course have the Welsh dragon with a small stripe to remind us of the Welsh overseas, and especially in Patagonia. For Scottish Gaelic, a Celtic cross of the same colours as found on the Scottish saltire, and something to remind them of their maritime past and indeed the current area where Gaelic is spoken, largely the Hebrides, both inner and outer, the islands. For Irish, something that tries to bridge the divide a little bit and not just using the Irish tricolour but incorporating some elements specific to Northern Ireland, like the red hand and some of the colours employed. For Insular Norman, it's a collective flag that represents both the Channel Islands and its connection to Normandy and the Norman language, of which it is a collection of dialects. Manx again looks to a Celtic cross and has the triskelion legs that are found on the Isle of Man and says something about its rebirth after dying out. And Cornish again has a similar cross design with the letters KRNW to show its connection to Kurnow or Cornwall in the Cornish language. Let me know in the comments below which of these language flags is your favourite, which one would you scrap, and why would you do that? And if you can come up with some better flags, my email is always in the description below, so please send through an email with your designs and I'd be happy to look at them. I always get some great emails after flag videos, so please don't hesitate to reach out. That is it for now though. Let me know in the comments below. I always love to hear from you, and I will see you in the next video. Let me know as well what kind of videos you would like to see, if there are some more language flag videos or ideas that you have. I know the previous language flags video did quite well, talking about various global languages, so I think I might revisit the topic and make something else on it there. I could do one for some other countries, for example, looking at how we might represent the languages of let's say Germany, but I think the UK is quite special in this way, certainly in Europe, for the amount of languages that it has, being the repository of all the Celtic languages apart from Breton. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I have been Hilbert, and this has been The History.